Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. So we're going to be continuing our celebration of Black History Month at the Horror Show. Last week we highlighted a few black horror films that we thought deserved to be in the conversation more. So we talked about Ganja and Hess, Spike Lee's remake, The Sweet Blood of Jesus. And we also talked about Casey Lemon's Eve Bayou and the fantastic Shudder documentary Horror Noir about the history of black horror and African Americans' contributions to the horror genre. Mike even has that as his background right now. For those watching the video, you can see that is the Horror Noir poster. Today we're going to be going over our favorite black characters in horror cinema, or at least some good standouts that we've liked a lot.
Yeah, we compiled a list of 27 actors and actresses, and it's a mixture of classics that we're all very familiar with, and we chose a few obscure ones that are worth mentioning. So we hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we did putting it together, that's for sure.
All right, perfect. You ready to get this started, Michael?
Oh yeah. Oh, and we're gonna start in chronological order. We couldn't put them in order of greatness. There's too many great ones, so we just started chronological order, starting with 1940.
Yeah, and we figure it would be better this way anyway, to try to give you, I feel like going in order will give the audience a better context of the history as it progresses. And we start at 1940 because, unfortunately, which is to be expected, especially from American cinema in the 20s and 30s, there wasn't exactly very much representation. So we start at 1940.
And the representation was kind of embarrassing and stereotypical.
So we're not even going to dive into. We're not going to even dive into those ones. We're going to get into real characters. No stereotypes in here.
Yeah, our first one is Dr. Jackson. She was played by Laura Bowman on the movie Son of Ingagi from 1940. It's the first horror film with an all-black cast. And the synopsis is: after a wealthy old recluse wills her gloomy old mansion to a newlywed couple, we find out the woman was killed by an ape man her father brought back from Africa. The secrets the house holds come back to haunt the newlyweds as shady individuals come around to collect a fortune of gold that the woman hid in the house.
This was a groundbreaking film, and I got to watch it this past week. And what's amazing about it is, especially in the time 1940, especially 1940s America, you didn't really see good representation of minority culture, particularly black culture, on screen. And what made this film groundbreaking, it was about a black community. And unlike a lot of films that might have dealt with black characters back in the day, there's no stereotypes, and it doesn't have to do with the struggle for racial equality or anything like that. It takes place within an all-black neighborhood. The lead character that we're highlighting is Dr. Jackson. She is not only she's a black female scientist who has a scientific breakthrough. The characters are lawyers, they're businessmen. They show them getting married, going to church, and you get to see in 1940 black people just being themselves and living their lives just as you and I would live it, going about it. So this is a pretty groundbreaking film, especially the character of Dr. Jackson. And I chose a quote from her that I think this is the perfect quote that sums up the character. "I've got it. The greatest discovery in medicine since Louis Pasteur. If it does what I think it will, I've done more for humanity than anyone else on earth. Don't know why I should care about humanity. Humanity's never done anything for me." So yeah, so what we have right here is an amazing quote that sums up her character. I think that this quote, I also picked it because it's the only hint of the movie that there is some kind of racial inequalities going on in the world at the time, just by the suggestion of humanity's never done anything for me, yet she's willing to go out of her way to do something great for humanity. And I think that's the story of a lot of black people in America, especially a lot of black people who fought in our wars, who fought in World War II with us, didn't receive the recognition that they deserved, even though they put their lives on the line. They've been there since the beginning. They've been scientists, doctors, lawyers, and thank God we have a movie that gives some kind of representation to that back in the day.
Yeah, sadly, I have not seen this one. I tried to get to it this week, but I wasn't able to. But it looks really good.
Yes, it's only an hour long, so it's a very short film for anybody who wants to get in and watch it. As they point out on that horror noir documentary, some of the makeup is obviously cheap. They were working with what they had, but considering the limitations, the budgetary limitations, and the era that it was made in, it's a pretty impressive achievement.
Nice. I definitely need to check that one out. Well, the next one we're going to highlight is a few years later in 1968. This is the character of Ben from the movie of Night of the Living Dead in both 1968 and 1990. The characters were played first by Dwayne Jones and then by the great Tony Todd. As many already know, Dwayne Jones was not hired because of his color. He was just the best actor that auditioned. The character in the script was supposed to be a crude, resourceful truck driver, but Romero rewrote the part for Dwayne because he was an academic type and he wanted to write the character to fit him. I like how Marilyn Eastman, who played Ellen, she later on said that Dwayne Jones was a tortured individual because of the racial tensions at the time. He was also concerned with the anger of the character. He wanted to change the scene where he hit Barbara. He really wanted to change that scene because he didn't like that his character had that anger like that and hit this woman. He insisted that they change it, but George Romero wanted to be edgy and he wanted to be cool, so he kept it in there. And he later on regretted it. And he looked back on it and he said he wished that he would have listened to Dwayne Jones, that Dwayne Jones was right, that he should not have had him hit Barbara. It shows what a gentle soul this guy was, Dwayne Jones, because everyone speaks very highly of him, everyone who worked with him. In an interview, he said it was a very pleasant experience for him making Night of the Living Dead. And he said the only unpleasant moment was when somebody smashed him off on set. Like, you don't get any more pure-hearted than that. As many of us already also know, it's one of the most successful indie films of all time. It had a $114,000 budget and grossed $30 million, which is $223 million today. In the remake, where Tony Todd played the character, Lawrence Fishburne, Eric LaSalle, and Ving Rhames were all considered for the part. This was Tony Todd's first film. And in this one, Ben becomes a zombie at the end, so they change a little bit at the end, but he still gets shot and killed. I wish they would have had him survive.
Yeah,
don't you?
I do. I feel like the ending kind of changes a lot and updates it for a different era since, like you said, what if, to rewind back, this part was not written for Dwayne Jones. Like you said, it was supposed to be more of a crude truck driver. And he wrote him to be a little bit more like Dwayne, which is a little bit more intellectual, much more intelligent take on the character. I do think, though, is that the ending of this film where it shows Ben getting shot by a white mob and being taken out is so reminiscent of photos from that era, from the civil rights movement from the late 60s. And this came out right in the heat of all the protests of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination and all that. There's a part of me that believes that George Romero wrote that in after the fact that he cast Dwayne Jones because it has too much of a racial subtext to it. It has too much of a timely subtext. And I think that adds a lot to the story because you see somebody, a black man who is the hero, and when you see the white mob that comes, it's obvious that that Dwayne Jones' character, Ben, is not a zombie when they shoot him. He looks like a normal human being. He's carrying things the way that a zombie would not carry, and they just shoot him, lynch him, and take him out. Throw him on a pile of bodies and just burn him. Part of me is convinced that George Romero rewrote it to try to fit the times a little bit more, and I think that makes the ending more effective. And I think what Tom Savini did when he did the remake, he wanted to put a little bit more emphasis, I guess, on the advancement of female characters. So the remake, you basically have Ben, who is the main character, but at some point he's usurped by this version of Barbara, who is a much stronger, more badass character who takes charge of her fate. So I think Tom Savini switched it to speak, I guess, to female audiences in that regard. And I can get the switch, but I think most people will always remember the original Ben from Night of the Living Dead being the definitive version. Also for being so groundbreaking, beyond Sidney Poitier, you didn't see many black lead characters on film like that, let alone somebody who was this independent, this strong, taking orders, everybody listening to him. He is basically the man in the situation, and all the white characters are, except for the one dumbass downstairs, they all basically listen to him. So, Night of the Living Dead. And this is the quote that I chose from Ben. I don't want to hear from you anymore, mister. If you stay up here, you take orders from me, and that includes leaving the girl alone. I picked that quote from Ben because it's the one that most exemplifies his fierceness, his independence of character, and his refusal to be a victim in the situation. Sadly, it does not end well for Ben, but I think that makes the movie only more timely and more emblematic of the era it was made in.
Yeah, and it's such an iconic character and an iconic performance in so many ways. And Tony Todd didn't revolutionize it or make it better or anything, but he was definitely a worthy successor.
Yeah,
and it was his first film, so he was just getting into being getting his start being a horror icon.
yeah. So yeah, Tony Todd will come up later. He gets his moment to shine, but I think in this one, I have to give it up to Dwayne Jones, one of the great lead performances in any '60s horror films, and one of the great horror characters of all time.
For sure. And speaking of one of the greatest black horror characters of all time, this brings us to 1972. The character of Mamuwalde in the film Blackula, played by William Marshall. It's about an ancient African prince turned into a vampire by Dracula himself, finds himself in modern Los Angeles. Now, this part was really important to William Marshall, not just important to his career. It was important for him to give the character dignity. So he worked very closely with the producers to give the character a backstory and give him some real human traits. And it's the first black vampire to appear on film, and it grossed over $1 million, and it was one of the most successful films of 1972.
Yep. One of the coolest characters in the history of horror movies. And I'm going to choose a quote. It's a cliche quote, but I think it just exemplifies how suave and sophisticated and cool he was. And it's really simple. All it is make it a Bloody Mary.
Yeah,
I wish I could deliver that line like William Marshall. I am no William Marshall, but his delivery of that line, I don't know how to put it, but when you see that movie, it makes you laugh. It has that little pun. It's a reference to his vampirism, but there's something very cool and classy about it. Almost James Bond-like, wouldn't you say? Almost like not stirred. Make it a Bloody Mary with kind of a twist. He was a great character. He was dignified. He was holding court against Count Dracula, fighting against the Atlantic slave trade, and he was a badass vampire in and of himself. He was dignified. The character didn't revel in any stereotypes, and I think it's one of the it's a pretty revolutionary character in film, especially in the horror genre, and something that I was lucky I got to see as a kid. My grandpa really insisted. I didn't want to watch this because, sometimes when you're a kid, you're averse to older films or older things, but my grandpa insisted that I watched Blackula with him. So this movie actually holds a very special place in my childhood memories.
And actually, until I started researching it, I had no idea it was so successful. I mean, one of the most successful films of 1972, that's huge. So this shows me that several times throughout the history of cinema, it's been proven that black horror cinema is viable, and it gets asses in the seats. I don't know why it kept falling by the wayside, and it didn't grow more than it did.
I think it's kind of indicative of Hollywood's attitudes. Where Blackula did get a sequel with Scream, Blackula Scream, introduced the world to the amazing Pam Grier. But I mean, other than that, you would think that it would lead to a wave, especially in Hollywood. Hollywood loves their trends, and anytime that they see something big happen, they want to capitalize on it. This just tells me that there was still some leftover prejudices that overrode their business sense in that matter. Because I mean, Blackula is successful. You would think with the type of thing with what Hollywood does, there would have been a slate of black horror films, but they probably just regarded it as a one-off or a fluke or something like that. It took a long time for a black horror film, black films in general, a black horror film to actually become something that Hollywood could look at and say, this is the model that we're going to look to, and we're going to produce more movies like that. It took way too long.
Yeah, and it's also, they didn't repeat the trend too much of giving black characters dignity and strip them with stereotypes. It just didn't become common enough after that. You think it would with the success, but like you said, with the climate in the U.S.
Well, the director of Blackula had an issue. Even I believe it was one of the ADs when they were doing a scene just to show you how people thought. And of course, it was a white AD. he asked them to pair people up for a dance scene, the couples, and what he did is he put all the white couples together and all the black couples together, and they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to mix these couples up, and we're not going to put this type of bad representation on screen. So I think in a lot of ways, director William Crane was very ballsy in what he was trying to do with his movie, and I'm glad that he fought the studio all the way through, but he ultimately got his vision out the way that he wanted to make it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to one of the two characters that we actually discussed quite a bit last week. It's Ganja and Hess from the movie Ganja and Hess in 1973, and also in The Sweet Blood of Jesus from 2014. In 1973, the characters of Ganja and Hess were played by Marlene Clark and Dwayne Jones. And then in 2014, they were played by Stephen Tyrone Williams and Zara Abrams. Marlene Clark actually praised the mixed race crew of Ganja and Hess. She loved how Bill Gunn put together this diverse crew of talented people, and how well he orchestrated everything and had everyone work together to an awesome end. Mm-hmm. It's a great classic film.
I mean, what's cool about this one is this was made, the producers funded it with the idea that this would be kind of like a riff on Blackula and sort of the blaxploitation movies that were going on at the time, which I love. I actually really have a fondness for blaxploitation films, but they are not the best representations of culture at the time. So basically, the director, Bill Gunn, got really lucky. He was able to take the movie away because the producers were out of town and rewrite it and do it as he wanted. And what he came back with was something that was definitely not an exploitation film. It was a full-blown art house horror film, a film that used vampirism as an intelligent metaphor for addiction. It tackled issues that plagued the Black community at the time. And it was groundbreaking in terms of its portrayal of Black characters. Like as is the case with many blaxploitation films, a lot of those characters are stereotypes. Even when they're empowered and when they're the heroes of the story, there still is some leftover lingering sense of a bad stereotype seeped into the characters. This one, he completely changed it by making Dr. Hess Green a very intelligent man, much like Dwayne Jones himself was. By the way, this is Dwayne Jones again from Night of the Living Dead. And I think that this is an even better fit for the actor. You could really see his intelligence come out. You could see his worldliness. He's sophisticated. He speaks multiple languages. He owns a nice mansion. He's a very sophisticated, educated, intellectual man with a deep sense of purpose in life. And I think that is actually kind of amazing and groundbreaking. And for when he becomes a vampire, which you feel a kind of sort of connection with him because there's more humanity in his performance than there is in most characters who are vampires. I feel like there's a lot of great vampire performances, and I love Bela Lugosi's Dracula. I love Gary Oldman as Dracula, and I even love what's his name, Klaus Kinski as Nosferatu, or Max Schreck as the original Nosferatu. As good as all of those performances are, they seem to emphasize the supernatural aspects of vampires and kind of are lax on the humanity. And I think the extra humanity helps this character. Then you also have Ganja, who is an even better character, if you ask me. She's fierce. She's independent. She's been through a lot. And she's one of the most beautiful and empowered Black female characters I've ever seen on screen. And I think what makes her great is that she gets the best dialogue in the movie, or the best monologues, and it's augmented by a great performance by Marlene Clark. Now, this is a quote I wanted to say from Ganja. This is a bit of a long quote, but I think this is what kind of gives you kind of a view into how she thinks. This is Ganja. It was as if though I was a disease. I have a brother that's 10 years older than I am, and I have a sister that's 8 years older than I am, so that I was obviously an accident. And it was Ganja. I came down with Ganja, you know. And I think that day I decided I was a disease, and I was going to give her a full case of it, that whatever it was she was going to have it. Maybe because she hurt me so badly. That day I decided I would provide for Ganja always. This is Ganja giving her monologue in reference to her relationship with her mother, and it kind of lets you understand her as a character who comes across as very assertive, a little bit fierce, maybe slightly overbearing, but I feel like that monologue and that speech and that specific line of dialogue really gives you an insight into her character and why she has this very tough exterior and why she won't let anybody feel sorry for her.
And it didn't sound like a speech. It came out very conversational, like it was really a part of her life.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. That's one of the best scenes in the movie. Is just, and it's crazy because this movie is filled with so many surrealistic images and wild scenes. But I think what stands out when I think of Ganja and Hess, that's the scene that most gets stuck in my brain is just the camera fixed on Marlene Clark, not moving, just letting her talk, share her experiences, and like you said, it doesn't come across as a monologue or speechifying. It just seems like somebody who is genuinely bearing their soul to the audience, to the camera, and just a great performance, a great character, awesome.
And the saddest thing about that film, I think it was a groundbreaking film, but it didn't get to enjoy its groundbreaking status till years later.
Until a couple of years ago, I'd say it wasn't very widely seen, but thanks to Horror Noir and Shudder and Kino Classics Blu-ray release of the film, the movie has found a new cult audience, and I hope it continues to grow in the years to come.
Me too. And it's two characters that were so strong that in the remake kind of paled in comparison to the original, but the characters are still very compelling.
Yeah, even in Spike Lee's version, which is hard to top the original Ganja and Hess, they're still very fascinating individuals and people.
Definitely.
Yep.
And that takes us to another fascinating individual. It's the character Diana Hill from the movie Sugar Hill, 1974, played by the actress Marky Bay. Now, the synopsis is, when her boyfriend is murdered by gangsters, with the help of a voodoo queen, Sugar Hill sells her soul to raise a zombie army to get revenge. I love the zombie design in this. Their zombies were based on real voodoo lore, and it was released by American International Pictures, who also released Blackula and Scream Blackula Scream. It's sexy. I can say all these same things about the movie as I can say about this character. Sexy, fun. It gets raunchy at times, sometimes campy, but it's always entertaining, and not just entertaining. It's entertaining eye candy. Yeah, I could not take my eyes off of it. I just watched it last night. I cannot believe I waited so long, all these years, and have not seen this yet. And sadly, Marky Bay didn't do any further horror films. She just did TV shows like Charlie's Angels, Trapper John M.D., and she was actually a regular on the TV show Starsky and Hutch.
Oh, she's fucking cool in this movie. I mean, just short of Pam Grier, and I always go back to Pam Grier because I think that's like a hard blaxploitation actress to top, but Marky Bay does a damn good job of coming close. She's beautiful, she's empowered, she's sexy, and what's cool about the character is when she's introduced initially, you don't pick up on these things about her fierceness. She just seems like a regular person. It's a very specific, heartbreaking circumstance that turns her into what she becomes, and she's so badass. Typical of all the blaxploitation heroes, and this is the quote I'm choosing. "I'm not accusing you, honk. I'm passing sentence." Love it. Loved all of the punishments. And what's kind of cool is that this came out like it's about 6 years after Night of the Living Dead, which kind of like realigned audience perception of what a zombie is, as opposed to like back in the days they were the voodoo zombies, just dead bodies that people used voodoo that were resurrected through voodoo to do the bidding of whoever resurrected them, versus Romero zombies, which was kind of radiation or an accident or a disease or whatever, a plague, whatever you want to call it, that made them into flesh-eating creatures that rose from the dead. This was interesting to see a movie. I didn't realize that they were still making the old school type of voodoo zombie films even after Night of the Living Dead had kind of established the new type of zombie lore. So I thought that was really cool. It's a really fun movie. All the zombie attacks are really cool. The makeup design is great, and of course, none of it would work as well without Marky Bay, who just owns every scene she's in. Yeah. The epitome of cool. I love when she feeds the guy to the pigs, and she goes, "I hope they like white trash." All of it.
Yeah, I was trying to remember that quote. Yeah,
I considered that one, but I felt like that required more context. I'm not accusing you, honk. I'm passing sentence. That sums it up right there. You don't have to see the movie to know what she means by that. And I don't use honk. All those funny, I don't know, I know that's an older term, honk or honky, for white people, and I don't really hear it anymore, but I always see it pop up in 70s films.
Yeah, and Marky Bay was such a great actress. The whole film for me rode the line between a good quality action drama and then a campy, over the top horror film.
Mm-hmm.
It just rode that line through the whole thing, and I love that about it.
And she's what keeps it together. The movie
it
would not be good without a central performance or like a presence like that in it.
Yeah, but part of it seems like very measured, very quality. Mm-hmm. With the writing. Some of the dialogue is really great, and the acting is really good. And then you get this badass chick coming with zombies and taking revenge. I loved it.
Yeah. This one's a total blast. Like if you get a chance to check it, I rented it. You have to. It's only a few bucks to rent on Amazon Prime. Totally worth the rental, especially if you're into like those blaxploitation. And this is cool because it mixes blaxploitation style, which movies like Shaft and Foxy Brown and Coffee, with voodoo zombie idea. And I think that's what makes it fun. It's like a very self-aware mashup of genres that you usually don't see go together.
Yeah, and I have to watch it a few more times, but already I'm starting to feel like it's going to be one of my favorite zombie films.
Yeah.
I just love the fun spirit of it and the quality of it, and it looks excellent, dude. I thought it was 80s.
At least a decade later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only way you could tell it was the 70s was the clothes and the hair.
Yep. Very entertaining movie, though.
The looks of it, really, really cool look to it. All the colors, all the wardrobe, everything was really cool in it.
Yep. I liked it a lot.
All right, now that we're getting toward the end of the 70s, now we're going to start talking about black actors who became legends in the horror genre. And the first one we're going to talk about is Peter from Dawn of the Dead, 1978, played by the great Ken Foree. Following a growing epidemic of zombies, 2 Philadelphia SWAT team members, a traffic reporter, and his TV executive girlfriend take refuge in a secluded shopping mall. I thought it was interesting to point out there was a particular scene where Ken Foree looked like he was scared shitless, and I found out he really was. When he's attacked by those 2 zombie children when he's in the hangar office, his reaction is authentic because he was not told that he was going to be attacked by those kids. He was shitting his pants in that scene.
Well, sometimes you got to goose things along to get the reactions you want out of your actors.
Yeah. And this guy became a legend after acting in 110 acting credits, and 25 of them were horror films. His horror films credits include From Beyond in '88, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 in 1990, and then Rob Zombie took advantage of his awesome acting skills in Devil's Rejects, his Halloween in '07, and Lords of Salem in 2012. This man is a very natural character actor. And he also has charisma where if he has to rise to the occasion and be one of the stars, he's most certainly has the acting chops. His delivery is effortless. He just doesn't seem to even be trying. He just seems like that character. It's an excellent character actor, and I loved him in Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, just so you know, we're highlighting him in general because I feel Ken Foree is such an accomplished actor in the genre that it would almost be an insult to pick one role. Because I think what defines him as an actor is the fact that he's in so many great horror films, and he's pretty underrated. I feel like Keith David and Tony Todd kind of eat up most of the attention, like in terms of being in the same realm of the kind of actors. And Ken Foree, I think, deserves to be considered. And not that he's not, but I notice more people talking about Tony Todd because, of course, he's Candyman, and Keith David because Keith David is iconic. Even outside of horror movies, just that voice. But Ken Foree is every bit as good as them. Arguably even more plugged into the horror genre and has had so many good roles. I actually put together a few quotes because he's had some good zingers and I couldn't pick one. So we'll start with the Dawn of the Dead one. The famous quote, this is the full quote, not just the part that's famous. Something my granddaddy used to tell us. You know Macumba, voodoo? Granddad was a priest in Trinidad. He used to tell us, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Dawn of the Dead, 1979, delivered the most iconic line in the series, and that's the tagline. That's so iconic. He got to deliver it. And in the remake, the 2004 Zack Snyder remake, he played a televangelist who got to deliver the line one more time. When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. So, of course, good on Zack Snyder to give a nod to the original and have Ken Foree come out. Then I got to go to another one. It's a little bit funnier. Devil's Rejects, one of my favorite horror movies. Are you saying that I would cut off a chicken's head, stick my dick in it, fuck it, and go, you accuse me of fucking a chicken, motherfucker? One of the funniest lines. That whole exchange of dialogue is hilarious. Rob Zombie really knows how to use them. And here's a couple of zingers from the Halloween remake. Let me pass this beast in peace. That's him when he's taking a Michael Myers is pounding on the door. And another one, this is one of his most famous ones. He always gets asked to do this. Let me introduce myself. I'm Joe Grizzly, bitch. And I'm going to cut that mask right off your face. Love it. Right before he completely gets eviscerated by Michael Myers. But I digress. He's just one of the best character actors in horror. And I think what gives him an edge is that he has a likability to him. He has an instant likability on his to him. I feel like every time you see him, you kind of want to take his side in any film that he's in. Even in The Devil's Rejects, he's such a piece of shit, part of the Firefly family and everything. You kind of feel bad for him when he gets his.
Yeah, I mean,
and these are
they were sadistic killers. You just ratted on them.
Yeah, you just ratted on them. Yeah. So
and I cannot stress how great the chemistry was between him and Sid Haig. They really seem like old friends.
They're brothers. They're supposed to be brothers. And it's funny, they actually look like brothers, despite the racial difference, the way that they're done in that movie in terms of like the bald head with Sid Haig and the same kind of beard and the loud gruffness. I was like, I could totally believe that they're brothers. And one of them probably had, a different parent or something like that. Yeah. But they seem like they grew up together. And they have instant character chemistry with Sid Haig and the rest of the family. Love.
He does so much for that film with such a small part.
Yes, he does. And I think he does it to every movie he's in. He always brings something special to it. So we had to give a big shout out to Ken Foree. Not any specific role, just Ken Foree, period.
Yeah. And the next one we're going to talk about is another legend in the horror genre. Not quite as seeped in the horror genre as Ken Foree, but he's definitely had his share of great horror roles. But especially his iconic role, this is Childs in John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982, played by the great Keith David.
Yes.
It's about a research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien. It's a true ensemble cast, and only the best actors could make this work as well as it did. They all work together on character development, and you can tell. And actually, Keith David and Richard Masur were the two largest of the cast, so when they got together in the rehearsals and stuff, they decided to be antagonistic to each other. So they had a big hand in what made that movie great, and the chemistry between the actors. But like I said, the acting and the chemistry just added to the realism of otherwise horrific and outrageous horror film. Isaac Hayes, Ernie Hudson, and Carl Weathers were all up for the role, but Keith David got it. He's had 331 acting credits, but only 9 of them, 331, but only 9 of them are horror. His main horror credits include They Live from '88, which has, in my opinion, one of the greatest cinematic fights in history.
Shout out John Carpenter.
Yep, where Roddy Piper uses his wrestling skills on Keith David, and Keith David hangs right there with him, and a lot of the stunts were done by him. I think they actually hurt each other in this scene.
I could definitely do it.
He was also Spawn in Todd McFarlane's Spawn series. He was in Pitch Black in 2000, and he was in Tales from the Hood Part 2 in 2018.
Yeah, I would like to see Keith David do more, because he has that. He even does those army commercials with his voice. He has like such a commanding voice that every time he speaks, you listen to him. And what's cool about his character Childs in John Carpenter's The Thing is that the character, especially in the early 80s, the cliche at the time was that the black character would die first. If not, the black character might live towards the end when the monster beats them to prove how badass they are, which is another bad trope. his character actually survives all the way till the end with Kurt Russell and gets to live. Now, granted, by the end of the movie, both characters are not in a good situation, and they're probably not going to make it out of it. But they're both the heroes at the end of the movie. They're both doing the right thing. I think it's cool that he survives all the way to the end. He's also probably the most consistently logical character in that movie that refuses to believe that it's anything too out there. Exemplified best by the line where he says it's funny. Again, I cannot do these lines justice. I'm not an actor. I just can't believe any of this voodoo bullshit. You believe any of this voodoo bullshit? All the dismissive line. He always cracks me up when he wants to be cut loose after it's proven that his blood is not, he's not the thing. He's like, come on, let me loose, cut me out. Very excited character, but very essential into making that film work. And also, another note, Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which is probably one of the greatest horror properties in comic books, he is so perfect as the voice of that character on the animated series. I want to hear him do that voice again. He has like the perfect commanding, I don't know, he has just that voice that when he speaks you have to stop and listen to whatever he says, and of course that made him a natural replacement for Clarence Williams III in the Tales from the Hood sequel. But yeah, Keith David, do more horror. Not that you're not very well established within the genre, you are, but do more, like Ken Foree.
Yeah, I was actually going to say he has. I see why he got chosen for Spawn, because he has one of those voices that you just pay attention to right when you hear it.
Yep, gotta
like
love
that. That is Keith David all the way.
all the way through.
Awesome actor too. Another one is very natural.
Yeah.
And do you think guys like this, especially with a role as iconic as he had in The Thing, he had to have deliberately avoided horror his whole career, right? If he only did 9 horror films.
I don't know if he deliberately avoided it. It's just that I think he's a very in-demand actor, and his voice is very in demand. I know he's done several voice credits beyond Spawn and those Go Army commercials and all that. He's probably just an in-demand actor, but he's one of the prominent voices in the horror noir documentary on Shudder, and he's in the theater speaking with Ken Foree. And so he seems to really embrace the roles that he had in the genre and really seems to love being a part of it. So it seems more like, I guess, more of an overload of offers as opposed to somebody deliberately choosing to avoid a genre, because he seems to really enjoy it and be proud of the roles that he's in. And he seems to have a very a knowledgeable command of the horror genre and seems to be a very big fan of it as well.
Oh yeah, definitely the way he talked about it. He knows a lot about it.
Yeah. Him and Ken Foree are a perfect pairing on that documentary. You got a lot of good stories out of those two, cutting it up together. Yeah,
and because we're going in chronological order, it's really not fair to mention this next guy after mentioning Ken Foree
and Keith David.
Yeah, but it's still a great role. It's a Spider from The Return of the Living Dead in 1985, played by Miguel A. Nunez Jr.
Mm-hmm.
It's the synopsis is: after a medical supply company accidentally releases toxic gas, it begins bringing the dead back to life. And I actually found out Miguel Nunez Jr. was actually homeless when he got the role.
Really?
So he went right off the streets into the audition and got it. And then after this movie, he went on to have 139 acting credits, including 7 horror films. His other horror film credits include Friday the 13th, Part 5 from 1985, Carnosaur 2, embarrassing enough, from 95, and another kind of embarrassing one, Leprechaun in Space from 96. But still a good actor.
Still a good actor. And in Spider, his favorite quote is, "I try not to think about dying too much." Yeah, I really like Miguel A. Nunez Jr. And I particularly like his personality, especially after seeing him on the Horror Noir documentary. Let's get this guy better roles. That's all I want to say. Is like, it's cool. Like, I mean, he's great in Return of the Living Dead. It's awesome. He's in which Friday the 13th? It's A New Beginning. Part 5 is A New Beginning.
Yeah, Part 5. Yeah.
He needs to be cast in more things, and he needs better roles. That's all I'm going to say. But he's a very busy actor. And it's kind of inspiring to hear his story about being homeless and then going from homeless to being cast in films. That's hard not to be a little bit proud of.
Yeah, and I'm a little selfish because I'm kind of glad that he never blew up like he deserves. So now we can put him in a movie and we can actually might be able to afford his fee.
Yes, yes. Come work with us, Miguel. We'll give you the best part you've ever had.
Yes.
So,
That brings us to another very spirited character. It's from Roland Kincaid from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors in 1987, played by Ken Sagos. Is that how you say his name?
I think so. I
Ken
think it's Ken
Sagos.
Sagos. Yeah.
And he actually did not want to audition for this role. His agent talked him into it. So in jest, he decided to go ahead and go to the audition. So it was pouring rain. So he's walking in the pouring rain, caught a bus, and then got to the audition, had to wait for hours. So then director Chuck Russell finally comes out after waiting for hours, and he says, okay, do whatever you want. So then Ken Sagos says, fuck you, and starts cursing him out. So he cursed out and screamed at the director, and then he hired him on the spot.
Must have been a very impressive curse session if that's what got him the job.
Exactly. And he went on to 32 acting credits, and 6 of them were horror films, including the next part 4, where he got killed, sadly, and then Troma's Death by Dialogue.
Yeah. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, for any Nightmare on Elm Street fan, that's always been a fan favorite. I'd say aside from the original Nightmare on Elm Street, that's probably that one that gets the most love from the fan base. It has like the most adulation. And I think a big part of it is Roland Kincaid, because talking to people throughout the years about that film, he seems to be what stands out in people's minds, especially I feel with a lot of minority audiences who grew up watching this movie. He was the character that people took to. He was the funnest character. He's the most spirited. I actually think he has the most memorable role in that movie because he's instantly likable. It's like Ken Foree, but a lot more spirited and happy. He has a very instant likability that's hard to resist. I think it's a damn shame that they killed him off at the beginning of A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And I actually like A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I know that one's not a fan favorite, but I dig it. I do think it was a mistake for them to kill him off right at the beginning, to take everybody's fan favorite character and kill him off in the first scene. And it was just like, so with The Nightmare on Elm Street 3, what you basically did was you broke the stereotype by having him live all the way to the end. And then in the fourth one, it's like some producer said, we have to fix that. We have to take it back. And then you kill him right at the beginning of the fourth one. Bad move. There are other characters, and I'm not going to say which ones because I'm not trying to shit on actors or anything, but he is probably one of the last people they should have picked to die right off the bat in the sequel.
Yeah, and he's one of those characters. He's one of those characters in part 3 that a lot of the things he says is kind of what's on the audience's mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. He says things that he's the audience's avatar. Whatever he says is probably what the audience is already thinking.
Yeah, because it's something strange to be happening. What the fuck are we doing here?
So my favorite quote of his is, "Yo, Freddy, where are you hiding at, you burnt face pussy? You think you're hot shit with that little Mew kid, don't you? Well, let me see you come get a piece of me, Kruger pussy." Yeah, I knew he was a little chicken. Very typical of Kincaid and his very feisty personality, instantly likable. Definitely, it's a fan favorite character for fans of that franchise. Should have lived through a few of the sequels, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we actually met him at a convention one time.
Oh, I forgot about that. We did meet him.
he was Kincaid in real life.
Oh yeah, he has that same type of spirited personality, that same instant likability, and seems like he's always in a good mood. I know he's not. We all have our moments as human beings, but when you see him around, he seems to be very very happy, very proud of the legacy that he's part of.
And you could always hear him at least a couple aisles over, just going off.
Yeah.
And he doesn't hesitate to say what pisses him off about the movies or anything.
Like that.
Or how much he hates getting killed off in 4, what the fuck's wrong with them.
Yep. He's basically Kincaid in real life.
Yep. That brings us to another understated character in horror. This one is Poindexter Fool Williams from People Under the Stairs in 1991, played by Brandon Adams. It's about 2 adults and a kid, played by Brandon Adams, break into a house where a brother and sister keep stolen children under the stairs. He's got only 37 acting credits, and his only other horror film is The Ghost in the Machine from 93. He got started as an actor in the Michael Jackson videos Moonwalker and Smooth Criminal.
Yeah. This is another one that I feel is groundbreaking in black horror because I think it's a normal. I mean, one of the things that you see in horror. I mean, most horror movies aren't like this, but there is a specific type of horror film that is told through the eyes of a child, or is told where the lead character is the kids. However, it's always a white child, and I think it was kind of groundbreaking to have a young black kid be the star of this movie. And mostly all black cast except for the villains. The villains are all white. It was a big inspiration to Jordan Peele. It's one of Wes Craven's best, most underrated films. I also think it's probably his most meaningful film, his most political film, because a lot of this movie is about how, and again, I know we get political a lot on here, but it's the subtext in the movie, so if that offends you, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the movie basically, the entire movie, The People Under the Stairs, is a critique of the Reagan era and Reaganomics and how it basically got rid of the middle class. How Reaganomics basically destroyed the middle class and created this gap of wealth, particularly in minority communities and black and brown communities. And I think this film really tackles that by having the lead characters are actually based on Nancy and Ronald Reagan. And they make them greedy people, bad landlords who have sucked the wealth out of the city and while the city lives in poverty, poor, people are dying off, struggling, living in crime. This white couple lives in a mansion, filthy rich, living in squalor, living hedonistically. They're sadomasochists. There's chains, there's whips, there's leather. They have kids hiding under the stairs. It's basically a lot of the things I think a lot of, especially at the time, black people feared about white people. And the movie ends with a literal redistribution of wealth when Poindexter Fool Williams finds a way to the house blows up, and all of the money goes flying, and all of the money comes back to the ghetto. One quote I picked from Poindexter Fool Williams is, "I'm tired of fucking around. So either put the gun down now or kiss your ass goodbye, boy." That's when he's talking to the main character and kind of using that racial term boy in the way that people used to use it back then, flipping it back on a villain. This is an exciting movie, groundbreaking film in some kind of ways, and probably Wes Craven's most political, meaningful film out of all of them. I do think Wes Craven did have a political streak that he kind of put things here and there and like put little messages underneath his movies. I think this one was the most blatant about the message it was trying to get across or what it was trying to convey.
So why didn't this kid become a huge star after this?
I have no idea. I think he had natural charisma.
Yeah.
He was adorable. He was a cute kid. He's very likable. And he was believable enough where he seemed like a little kid. He didn't seem like a grown-up in any way. Like a lot of those times when in horror movies, when the kid is the main character, they force them to grow up and act in ways that are adult. He does act in ways that force him to grow up a little bit. He does exhume a little bit of maturity, but you still get at the sense that at his core, he is actually a kid who's up against insurmountable odds and doing his best to try to topple them. Somebody with a good heart, somebody with a sense of decency. And I think that's part of what makes the character so memorable, is what makes the audience instantly on his side, is you sense his humanity and a sense of innocence that he has, despite living in a world that isn't innocent.
And look how he handles himself with accomplished actors around him.
Ving Rhames, oh yeah, all the stuff with him and Ving Rhames, the stuff that he says to him as a kid, funny shit.
Yeah. And how do you still shine when you have Ving Rhames to act opposite of?
They must have went through, I mean, I don't know what the process was, but they must have went through a difficult casting process to find somebody who's like, okay, who's going to hold their own with all of the actors in this movie? Who's going to hold their own? So I think they did a good job of finding a kid who did that in Brandon Adams.
Well, I remember I don't think this film got taken seriously enough when it came out. Mm-hmm. It was treated as a silly little quirky film, and I don't think it got the recognition it deserved for being such a great political commentary.
I think it gets that more now. I've noticed that there seems to be a resurgence for People Under the Stairs, and I think it also has to do with the internet and like Blu-ray collecting and like the Scream Factory and Shout Factory, kind of like making horror audiences get excited again at owning films or having access to films that were not easily accessible before. We live in an era, especially in the film era, of curation and discovering new things. So I think it's only appropriate that the People Under the Stairs would be getting kind of a new sort of evaluation and appreciation in the current era. Took a long time for the film to get its due.
And I think it's still a very highly entertaining and original film, even if the political message is lost on you.
Yeah, I think that I think it's thrilling from beginning to end. It's never boring. It's very exciting, even if the political message is lost on you. But kind of blunt, I think you'd have to be trying to miss the political message. But hey, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But aside from the political message, it is just an exciting, fun horror film.
Yeah, the political message is very clear, but not beating you over the head or not preaching to you.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
That was very effective. All right, that brings us to a very unlikely character to be mentioning in the horror genre, because it's not even from a horror film, but it's definitely a scary, frightening character. That's Roland Bishop from Juice, 1992, played by Tupac Shakur, my all-time favorite rapper. I loved him.
A million other people.
Yeah, I loved him just as much as an actor as I did as a rapper.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed by Ernest Dickerson, who directed Demon Knight. And Tupac plays one of 4 inner city teenage friends and is obsessed with power, or as they call, or lack thereof, and they call it juice. After he murders someone, he turns on his own friends and hunts them down to keep them from ratting on him. Now, I thought it was interesting that I found out Anthony Tretch Chris auditioned. He actually auditioned for this part, and he just brought Tupac along. Huh?
Naughty by Nature. Tretch.
Oh, that's what he's. I couldn't think of what he's from.
Yeah.
So Anthony Tretch Chris from Naughty by Nature actually auditioned for the role, and he just took Tupac along with him. So Tupac was just sitting there with him, so they said, why don't you read too? And he was actually reading for the Omar Epps' role. Mm-hmm. And then Ernest Dickerson was so blown away by his performance that he had him come in a second time to audition for for Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was cool that Tupac still made sure that Tretch was cast as an extra. But he made his first album while he was filming Juice. He was actually on set between takes, writing down lyrics and stuff on a little notepad.
Tupac.
Yeah, and then it was another interesting fact that when Bishop kills one of his friends, I'll just go ahead and say it needs to be said for the impact of the scene. But when Bishop kills one of his friends, Raheem, he actually burst into tears on set on that part.
Did he really?
And, yeah, and it's so impressed the director and the producer, and it's just a testament to how deeply affecting this role is. I mean, it's a thriller, it's like type of inner city thriller, but Tupac brings a sophistication to the role, a darkness to the role, you can feel like the insanity, like the unhinged insanity inside of him, and there's this darkness in him that has kind of waited to come out. He's constantly bullied. He's not taken seriously. So when his back's against the wall, he turns vicious, and wow, what a vicious performance this is.
And another, just to explain why this is appropriate to mention in a horror context, even though this is not technically a horror movie. One, it's directed by Ernest Dickerson, who is very entrenched in the horror genre from television, working on The Walking Dead and Dexter, but more importantly, in his own films. He did Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight with Jada Pinkett Smith, and he also made Bones, the Snoop Dogg film, which we'll get to a little bit later. He's a huge fan of the horror genre. He's very connected to it. He's very plugged into it. And even though this is technically not a horror film, I can tell that it's directed by somebody who is a fan of horror and who watches a lot of horror. And the best example I could use is there's a part where Omar Epps' character is waiting for Tupac to show up, where they decide that they're going to meet up. And it's the shot of just him kind of in an alleyway, and you see the background, it's all black. It's very reminiscent of the shot in Halloween where Jamie Lee Curtis is up against the door and the empty doorway is right next to her, and it's all black, and then you see Michael Myers' face slowly materialize out of the darkness and kind of send a jolt. The same thing happens with Tupac's character. You have the same kind of type of angle. You have the close-up on Omar Epps, and then you have the all black in the background, and then you see Tupac emerge very subtly, like you barely even notice it before he's actually right there. He has the ability to appear at different places. He's intimidating. A lot of it reminds me, I could tell that the way that Ernest Dickerson shot him and the way that he framed him in a lot of ways was inspired by a lot of classic horror movie monsters. And the performance is actually very frightening. There's something very believable about the sociopathy that he has. And also interesting, Tupac, besides being a hip-hop artist, which he's most known to the world as, attended the Baltimore School for the Arts with Jada Pinkett Smith, and studied ballet, and is a classically trained Shakespearean actor. So I think it really comes across in the performance, and particularly this one quote that is the most iconic moment of the movie. It's when Tupac really lets you know that Bishop's character is completely unredeemable. When he says, you know, when he's confronting his friend over the fact that he keeps calling him crazy, he says, you know what? Last time you said that, I was kind of tripping, right? But now, you're right. I am crazy. And you know what else? I don't give a fuck. And I don't give a fuck about you, and I don't give a fuck about Still, and I don't give a fuck about Raheem either. I don't give a fuck about myself. Look, I ain't shit, and you less of a man than me. So as soon as I figure out that you ain't gonna be shit, pow, so be it. You remember that, motherfucker, because I'm the one you need to be looking out for, partner. I'm not delivering these lines good, so laugh all you want at it. But the way that Tupac delivered those lines, the intensity and the look in his eye, is truly frightening and scary. And he gives it, along with Ernest Dickerson's very careful direction, the feeling of a horror movie. So I think it's more than appropriate to bring this performance because it kind of hinges on the edge of being horror. And you could argue about this. The horrors of inner city life, the guns, the violence, the endless cycle of oppression is its own form of horror.
Yeah, and just recalling his delivery as you read that line, it just gave me chills. And there's a layer of emotion in this too, because before it turns into this scary film with this guy hunting down his own friends, it's a very touching portrayal of friends trying to support their friend in his DJ exploits. Mm-hmm. And they have real bonding moments, but thanks to Tupac's performance, it doesn't seem his darkness and his unhinged craziness doesn't seem to come out of nowhere. Yeah. You see little hints of it as he's mistreated by the other gangs and stuff in the streets, and he has to put up with all this gang drama and shit. Yeah. And you see it bubbling up in him, and then when it culminates in this murder spree, it's scary, and it's also deeply moving to me. Mm-hmm. Because you get to know these characters, you build affection for these characters, especially that heavy-set kid. Mm-hmm. You build affection for these characters, and they don't deserve to die like this. And then you see the look of horror on his friend's face when their friend is coming after them. That's their friend killing them, and it has this heartbreak in their eyes. Mm-hmm. When he comes to them, and that contrasted by the coldness in the eyes of Tupac just makes it so effective. And every horror fan should check out this performance, definitely.
Yeah, check out Juice, Ernest Dickerson.
So we go from an understated performance, an atypical choice for a horror performance, and we move on to another legend in the horror genre. That's Candyman, played by Tony Todd in the 1992 film. And he also played Candyman in Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. And he's also going to be in Candyman 2021.
And Candyman Day of the Dead.
Yeah, Candyman Day of the Dead. He was also in the Hatchet films, Hatchet 1 and 2. He was in pretty much all the Final Destination films, right?
Yep.
And as we mentioned, the Night of the Living Dead remake, Wishmaster, Frankenstein, The Crow, Tales from the Hood 3 coming up. In the Scream TV series, he's had 233 acting credits, and 60 of them were horror. So he's the most accomplished horror actor on our list. And you actually posted an interesting fact on our page a while back, how Tony Todd was paid $1,500 per bee sting to be stung all those times in the face by the bees.
Yeah, he actually put dental dams in his mouth. So when you see him in the movie opening his mouth and the bees come out, that's really bees coming out. And the dental dams, obviously, so they don't fly into the back of his throat or anything like that. But he's actually, you're not seeing special effects or animatronics. You're actually seeing a man with a mouth full of bees, which I'm pretty sure is an insane experience. And I know he got paid for every bee sting. That's still pretty ballsy and really putting yourself out there and on a line for a role. What makes him significant is he's like of the modern day horror films, he had like people like Michael Myers. You had Jason, of course. You had your Freddys. You have your Chuckies. You even got your Pinheads and all that. And these are all great horror icon stuff. And I think we had seen horror heroes. I mean, I guess you could count Blackula, but there's something a little bit more dignified that he came across as less villainous than I would say Count Dracula does. I feel like Candyman is the first real black supernatural horror villain, and what Tony Todd brings to the role, like he's also a Shakespearean, classically trained actor. He brings a sense of gravitas to the role, a sense of intelligence, a sense of sophistication and cunning, because Candyman is based on an urban legend about an old artist painter who was a liberated black man, and it's in an era when slavery was still a thing, who painted portraits for all the white people, for the rich white people, because he was such a gifted artist. He ended up falling in love with one of his subjects, a young white woman, of course, who he impregnates. Of course, they lynch him. They cut off his hand, which is his artist hand, and replace it with a hook. Fill him with bees so he gets stung. So he gets stung to death. And he has the type of backstory that's not typical of like Freddy Krueger, who's a nasty, grungy character and a child murderer. There's nothing romantic or cool about it. Michael Myers is just a cipher. He is just pure evil personified. There isn't any personality there at all. Jason is Jason. I'm not going to get into that. That's his whole thing. But he's like the first one that he brings a sense of sophistication, a sense of suave, a sense of coolness to the role. The way that he looks, the way he's dressed, he looks, even though Tony Todd is very frightening, his presence as the Candyman is very frightening, it's also frightening because he looks sophisticated and intelligent. And I think that in and of itself is already intimidating for a horror villain. Not only is he supernatural and scary, but he seems to possess a type of sophistication that you will never understand. So almost feels like you'll never be able to topple him.
And he could also be sexy and sensual too, and you buy it.
Oh yeah, and his line readings, like, my God, Tony Todd's line readings on this are good. I actually got a couple of quotes because this is hard for me to pick one quote from Candyman.
Oh yeah.
All right. I am the writing on the wall, the whisper in the bathroom. Without these things, I am nothing. So now I must shed innocent blood. Come with me. Fucking great line reading. They will say that I have shed innocent blood, but what's blood for if not for shedding? With my hook for a hand, I'll split you from your groin to your gullet. I came for you. And that's a very graphic, violent sentence, and the way he says it makes it sound sensual and smooth and almost loving. The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, there is nothing to fear. Our names will be written on 1,000 walls, our crimes told and retold by our faithful believers. We shall die together in front of their very eyes and give them something to be haunted by. Come with me and be immortal. Just his line readings. It seems like when he reads those lines, it seems to come with like a place that's deep within his body. It almost seems unearthly, the voice that comes out of him.
Yeah.
Great performance, like a really just commanding screen presence.
And he brought class to that role. And then later on, he also brings class to the Hatchet franchise. He brings class to the Final Destination franchise. He always has this air of sophistication about him and of the elder statesman of horror. Yeah. Where you can count on him to be effective in whatever role you put him in.
Yeah, like if you're making a cheap, sleazy horror movie, put Tony Todd in it, and it'll automatically seem less cheap and sleazy than it is.
And some of the actors on here, it's sad that they didn't get enough roles after this, and it's kind of sad they didn't do more horror. But Tony Todd done tons of horror, but it's also kind of sad that so many of them are bad. He was just an actor for hire on a lot of these films, just because up and coming filmmakers want Candyman in their cast.
Could you blame them?
Yeah, but still, even though he done a lot of bad ones, there's still enough good quality roles and standout roles that doesn't tarnish his legacy at all doing those bad ones.
That's another one who we met, who's in real life, he's fucking tall as hell. He hovers over. I mean, I'm not very tall to begin with, so that guy he's big. He has a presence in real life too.
And he's one of those people like Sid Haig, where he's very nice and very intimidating at the same time.
Yep, exactly.
Where he's very nice and polite to you, but you're afraid to say the wrong thing.
Yep. And
I still want to try to get him. We were going to get him, but I haven't been able to get through to him. He said he wanted to come on the show, and he said he had some gripes with some studios where he really wanted to get on and air his grievances. So I hope we still get him on.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep trying.
Definitely. So the next one on our list, another great one coming up.
Yep, the next one is Mr. Sims from Tales from the Hood, 1995, played by Clarence Williams III. His other horror credits include Maniac Cop 2, Twin Peaks is kind of horror adjacent, and he was also in the Mod Squad, and he was in Sugar Hill in 1994, not the Sugar Hill we discussed, Sugar Hill with Wesley Snipes, and he was also in Tales from the Crypt, the TV series.
Yes. This is another one where basically Tales from the Hood came out like around the time that Tales from the Hood was such a big thing on HBO in the 90s, which was inspired by like all the classic EC comics and all those horror comics like the Tales from the Crypt and the Vault of Horror. This is basically just a modernized version of Tales from the Crypt with, all the stories, they're steeped in horror, but they all have some kind of moral underlying message, and they all feature some character getting a kind of comeuppance. So this takes it, but instead of all white characters, which is what you usually see in stuff like that, it's all black characters, and it's all stuff, and every horror story in here is excellent. There's 4 of them, including the wraparound with Mr. Sims, and all 4 of them tackle different issues that the black community faces, but it does it in such a way that's really fun. It's never preachy. The message is very clear without it ever being beaten over your head. And the horror and the fun qualities are very genuine. So it's a movie with a lot of strong political messages in it, but it never forgets to be a very fun horror movie at the same time. And Mr. Sims' character is the Crypt Keeper in this one. He's like the Crypt Keeper, except he's not rotting away. And he's even a little bit funnier in the Crypt Keeper some ways. He's got very unique mannerisms. He's very eccentric actor in the way that he moves about, his line readings. And this is the best line for me. And it's just, again, I can't do Clarence Williams justice where he says, "Don't worry, you'll get the shit. You'll be knee deep in shit. I've got it hid. There's so much I couldn't even lift it all myself." He does it so hammy and like it's so unabashed in the way that he eats up the screen. There's nothing subtle about the performance at all, and I think that's what makes it so much fun. Is it looks like a very sophisticated actor letting loose and having a good time on set.
And what I love about this movie is it's so much of it has like general horror elements that you see in many other horror films, and has some horror tropes in it, but that's mixed with real life horrors that black people have to deal with. They're specific to black people.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have asked for a better host to hold all this together and keep it cohesive than Clarence Williams III.
And what I like is that the messages it has behind it are very important. I don't think a lot of people get pissed off when you put any kind of messages in movies, which is kind of stupid if you ask me. But I think this is a movie that could help people understand some of these problems more, or these plights a little bit more, because it's communicated in a way that's easy to relate to and fun for the audience. So I think it probably does a good job of making the audience relate a little bit more to struggles that they might not have any relation to in real life.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's another awesome one. And Keith David did a good job filling his shoes, but just wasn't Clarence Williams III. He did a great job though.
Yeah, and that's funny. We're just praising Keith David. He didn't do it, but the thing is that Keith David is such a suave, sophisticated actor, and he does do a good job with the role. But I feel like it's hard to replace the pure eccentricity of Clarence Williams and that fucking hair that he has. I think that's what makes the performance, is that big ass frizzy hair that makes him look, the look in his eyes, the unhinged. Where like Keith David could look a little bit unhinged, but Clarence Williams has more of a, he's a little bit more expressive in his vocal mannerisms. He doesn't like, Keith David has that very even-keeled, sophisticated, very grabbing voice. Clarence Williams is a little bit more wiry, a little bit more, I don't know, there's more of a looseness to his style of speaking that I think serves this role better. And like I said, Keith David did a good job, but I think you can't replace Clarence Williams in this role.
So is Tony Todd going to be playing this role in part 3?
I believe so. And I think that's kind of a great lineup to have the host be Clarence Williams, then Keith David, then Tony Todd. Hey, if you do a fourth one, get Ken Foree, damn it.
Yeah. Let's hope part 3 is as good as 1 and not as bad as 2.
Exactly. So, next one.
That brings us to another female horror character, Jerry Lynn, from Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight from 1995, played by Jada Pinkett, who is now Jada Pinkett Smith. And she also had a bit part at the beginning of Scream 2 that was small but very effective.
And memorable. Yeah, so Ernest Dickerson, another Ernest Dickerson film on the list, had to put it on there. And what makes Jada Pinkett's Geraldine is what makes her kind of like a standout or unique is I think she was like one of, if not the first, I can't recall, I could be wrong, but might be the first black final girl, meaning, you know, that trope of the female who lives to the end to battle it out with the monster.
Yeah.
And I think she fulfills that role really well. She's tough, she's believable, she's likable. I like that platinum blonde hair that she has going on. I know that Ernest Dickerson was a little bit upset that she can't, because he fought for her to get the role in this movie. They were just going to get a white actress for it, but he really fought to have Jada Pinkett, and she ended up dyeing her hair a certain way and just showed and told him, like, I hope you can work with it. And he was a little bit upset with that choice, where he was like, that's not why I hired you. But ultimately, I think it ended up working for the character because it's such an unusual haircut that I think it only informs the character's independence and individuality, so it ended up being a good choice on Jada Pinkett's part to put such an unusual haircut on her. And because it's not a haircut that you associate with being ultra feminine, where it's long hair, it's flowy, there's something tough about it, but she's still beautiful and feminine.
Yeah, I loved her hair, I loved her whole look, and I loved when she becomes a badass in the movie, then you can see how cut she is.
Yeah.
She's all in shape, all fit.
Yeah, and she attended the Baltimore School for the Arts with Tupac, and they both got to play a lead in an Ernest Dickerson film. It was just an interesting little bit. And of course, the line I picked was her getting all excited. This is when she's after a dream and tries to kind of attack. She goes, "What the hell is that shit?" And it's such a hilarious line reading because it's a logical line reading. It's what any person would be, how anybody would react if they saw something so extreme or so beyond the pale of what you think is possible or anything you would experience in your life. So her reactions to things and that like are very believable. Yeah,
and this is another actress that brought the level of sophistication to kind of a campy film.
Yeah, I don't think she was campy. I think the movie's campy, but I don't think her character is campy. And when I say campy, it's campy in a good way. It's a blast. But she brings a level of seriousness.
Yeah, when she's called on to be serious, she's ultra serious. And then when she has to deliver those lines with a little bit more comedy to it, she delivers that excellent too.
Yeah, she does. She does. So, Jada Pinkett, now known as Jada Pinkett Smith in her entanglements. Just kidding. And also love her in Scream 2. She had a bit part in Scream 2, and she gets killed off right away. And I love its typical Scream fashion. The movie itself is tackling the fact that the stereotype and the trope of black people dying first in movies even putting it in the character's mouth and having her complain. And she always seems to be the perfect avatar for the audience, like in Tales from the Crypt, when she says all of her reactions are believable. Her reactions to watching the stab movie at the beginning of Scream 2, when she's yelling at the screen like, no, don't do that, don't go in there, like getting pissed off at like all the dumb decisions that characters are making in a horror movie. I'm like, I think we can all relate to that. I think we all can relate to the Jada Pinkett Smith type of thing. So even though she's not the final girl in Scream 2, I feel that she's used somewhat in the same way where she gets to be the avatar for the audience in that particular sequence.
Well, she's a great choice for that sequence because they had to put something in there that somewhat approached the visceral effectiveness of the opening scene of Scream.
Yeah.
So the fact that they chose her and Omar Epps was a great choice, I think.
Yeah, Omar Epps, who's also in Juice. Yeah. See, I'm telling you, if Tupac lived, he would have been more in these movies. He would have been in some good horror movies, and he probably would have been an Oscar-winning actor. But I digress.
Yeah, I would have loved to see Tupac as a full-on horror villain. That would have been awesome.
Yep. So the next one is another female character, am I right?
Yeah, this one's a little light on horror, but it's still an important character. It's Rochelle Zimmerman from the movie The Craft in 1996, played by Rachel True. And she was an excellent part of the horror noir documentary. She had a lot of really cool insight and a lot of cool things to say about the horror genre. Yeah,
she did. She's funny too. The stuff that she says cracks me up or puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, and she could have easily come off as like the token black person in The Craft, but no, she owned that role. And she also had the chemistry with the other girls where they really seemed like a tight-knit group of friends.
Yeah,
and that's another one where it's a bit of a heartbreaking scenario when you see all the friends bond at the beginning and then you see them kind of fall apart as the movie goes along.
Yeah, and it's interesting about The Craft. It's about 4 troubled girls, and they each face their own issues. They all have their own thing going on in their lives. And her thing was racism, and I don't think that was in the original script. It's only when they cast her. And she wasn't a fan of it at the time because it didn't seem like a serious enough thing to her, because she felt like this is like normal to me. It's what I live with in her life. But she says, looking back now, she's glad that she made that choice because she is the odd, because that's such a big cult 90s movie, especially for female horror fans specifically. I know a lot of women who love The Craft, and I think it's important that out of all the white characters that are in it, you have to have at least one minority character that the other members of the audience could latch onto and they could relate to. And the things that she goes through with that blonde bitch, the one that's really rude to her and who says very nasty things to her, very compelling. And I really like her sense of humanity. I think she's a good person, who's practicing witchcraft, because she has such a sympathetic heart that when she takes revenge, I forgot who that blonde girl was, but when she takes revenge, it starts ruining her life in a way that Rochelle actually starts to feel guilty. She starts to feel bad for what the girl is going through, despite the fact that she was antagonized by her, despite the fact that she experienced abuse and racism from her, and she said some really nasty shit to her. There's a part of her that still is a good person and doesn't want to see her suffer like that, despite the fact that she made her suffer. So I think she is very endearing character and a very human, a very warm character, and probably, I don't know, she's a standout in the movie for me.
And that was Ben Stiller's wife. I forgot her name. That was in those scenes with her.
Oh, really? That was Ben Stiller's wife?
Yeah, from the one from Dodgeball with Vince Vaughn.
Interesting. And this was her quote I picked. I don't know. She doesn't want to be white trash anymore. I told her, "You're white, honey. Just get over it." Pick that. That's a funny line. But yeah.
And her story arc, did you get a little bit of Carrie vibes on it?
Yeah, definitely.
Where she's bullied at school and then she becomes empowered by this power that she gets, but then she dials it back, like you said, when she sees that it's really hurting somebody. She has regrets, where Bruce Balk's character goes off the rails and she doesn't care at all.
She has no remorse at all. So yeah, she's it's a very endearing performance and it's a very endearing character, and I think it's an important character because this is such an important film for female horror fans that you had to have not all white girls if you want to like try to speak for. And of course, they still could have done better representation in the craft. I'm not here to complain about that though. We're here to celebrate the fact that she was that person in that movie and that she was able to be. The movie was able to have a character that other audience members could look to and feel like they were a part or in on the story.
And it's an integral character in an ensemble cast, just like Keith David in The Thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So that brings us to another performance that we mentioned last week. We'll touch on a little bit this week because we have to mention her in the when we talk about great performances in horror. It's Eve Baptiste from Eve's Bayou, 1997, played by Jurnee Smollett. She, of course, is from HBO's Lovecraft Country, and I just found out she's from True Blood, and she has sex with the shapeshifter guy. So I'm gonna have to go pick up on True Blood again because it had already lost me by the time she got on the cast, so I stopped watching it. But now that I know that she was one of the stars in it, I got to go back and watch it because this woman is phenomenal. And you could see it when she was 10 years old as Eve Baptiste. You could see that she was going to be a very accomplished actress and she was going to play some awesome roles. And I hope she gets a lot more from now on after Lovecraft Country because I was blown away by Lovecraft Country in every way, especially her performance.
Yeah, Eve Baptiste is a great character because it's much like Poindexter in The People Under the Stairs. It's another child actor. And like you said, it's mostly white children, mostly white male children. So this takes it a step further by having the lead be a young little black girl. And the fact that this movie is dominated by strong, empowered women and great actresses. And Samuel L. Jackson's there is mixing it up, but he's not necessarily the best person in the movie or the one that you latch onto. Eve Baptiste is a great character, somebody that you really have a true affection for as an audience member. And she's very smart, she's intelligent, she's perceptive, she has a good heart. Like a child, she makes mistakes and she thinks she knows what she wants sometimes. Like children, we think we want something but we don't actually want it. She sells every moment that she's in. She sells the heartbreak. And I'm thinking of the line where she said, "And where's Daddy? He's never home. He's supposed to be home sometimes." The way that she can pick up on the trouble that her family's going through while other people ignore it. I wanted to bring up one other character. We didn't prepare this together, so this is just me going a little off. I didn't want to leave out Debbie Morgan's character, Moselle Baptiste Delacroix, who plays her aunt. This is a film with so many great standout female actresses that I feel like it's hard to nail it down to just one character. Obviously, you had to pick Eve, but I think the aunt is also another important character that brings something to the role, that brings a certain sense of gravitas, and she has the best line in the movie, or I should say speech, where she says, and this is something that when I heard, I was like, damn, it's her delivery of the speech, the way that she says it. She says, "Life is filled with goodbyes, Eve, a million goodbyes, and it hurts every time. Sometimes I feel like I've lost so much I have to find new things to lose. All I know is there must be a divine point to it all, and it's just over my head. That when we die, it will all become clear. And then we'll say, so that was the damn point. And sometimes I think there's no point at all, and maybe that's the point. All I know is most people's lives are a great disappointment to them, and no one leaves this earth without feeling terrible pain. And if there is no divine explanation at the end of it all, well, that's sad." The way that she delivers that speech in the movie actually kind of like gave me chills. It was kind of breathtaking. And like I said, I cannot do any of these actors justice with my line readings. I'm just trying my best. But such a memorable part of that movie that I couldn't leave out Moselle's character at all. I think she was too integral into making it great.
And I thought it was so sad, some of those scenes between her and Jurnee Smollett.
Yeah.
Because
they have great chemistry too.
Yeah, she's effectively saying some horrible things that could really be detrimental to her growth, her mental growth, you know. Mm-hmm. So you're really conflicted with what she's saying, but there's truth to what she's saying, and you're concerned for the family, and you're mostly concerned for this little girl, and it's just the performances by both of them makes that dynamic so effective.
Yeah. So great performances, great characters. Narrowed it down to two, but really all of the actresses and Samuel L. Jackson are incredible in that movie.
And this is another one where a young 10-year-old actress surrounded by very accomplished actors. Pretty much everybody else in the cast was accomplished actors. And the way that she held her own, not only held her own, kind of outshined a lot of them. I was just so impressed. And then it's no surprise that she was such a powerful force in HBO's Lovecraft Country.
Definitely.
And I cannot wait to see what else she does. Especially, I hope she sticks to horror. She was good in Birds of Prey. I really like that movie.
Yeah, she was.
So I just hope, judging from that, because she did play such a good superhero, don't put her in any more superhero movies, please.
Hey, it's the money, baby. Money.
Yeah. Brings us to another understated horror performance. It was Detective John Hobbs, played by Denzel Washington in 1998's Fallen. This is one where he's after this demon that keeps leaping from body to body. And I love it. It's a great performance. It's another one that he brings class to a horror film because he's a very accomplished actor. He's been in some of the greatest movies I've ever seen, and one of my favorite actors. Period. And to see him in a horror film like this, I nerded out. Loved it.
I don't have much to say. I haven't seen this movie in a while, but it does stick out in my brain. There's one line that sticks in my brain. Just quoting a song. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. And if you see the movie, you'll know you'll never listen to that song by the Rolling Stones, Time is on my side, the same way again after you see it in Fallen with Denzel. Trust me, you will have a completely different view on that song.
Yeah, and I wish I had more to say about this, but unfortunately I ran out of time researching this week. I had tons of work. So I hope we still do them justice by discussing the rest of these because I did not get to the research.
Okay.
But the next one is one that I watched. I watched it back then, but I didn't remember anything about it. It was and this character is Jimmy Bones, played by Snoop Dogg in Bones from 2001. This is another one by Ernest Dickerson. And Snoop Dogg was also in Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror.
Yes.
And I cannot stress enough how entertaining this movie was. It's a campy slasher. A lot of it's very campy. A lot of it's very formulaic slasher. But there's enough stylistic flourishes from Ernest Dickerson, and the performance by Snoop Dogg was so impressive. I loved him. He brought a seriousness to it. I loved his look. I loved his whole backstory. I loved all the flashbacks of
the
him
70s
in his neighborhood.
When it turns into like a 70s style blaxploitation film.
Yes.
You got Pam Grier in there, able to like revisit her look and style, how she was back then. Yeah. This is one I'm not gonna lie, I didn't want to check out for a long time because there's something about it that seemed campy and goofy to have Snoop Dogg as a horror villain. Because Snoop Dogg, in and of himself, is a very, I don't know, I look at him as a very humorous character in pop culture. I love Snoop Dogg. He always makes me laugh or makes me smile with what he has to say. He's interesting to follow on social media. I just thought that seems like such a strange choice to have him as a horror villain. But how can you not love it when you see the finished product with lines like, "Gangsta of love don't eat no fried chicken," or "I'm on a high, a supernatural high." And just the way that Snoop Dogg says it with his like sense of cool, he's a great he's a great presence. I won't say it's like a super great performance, but it's good for what it's supposed to be, and it brings a certain type of presence and a certain type of swag to it. And the movie is, weirdly enough, it is formulaic, as you say, but I think what like redeems it is with Snoop Dogg, it's Pam Grier. Pam Grier elevates anything she's in, and I'm convinced of that. And the way that it's filmed, like Ernest Dickerson, you could tell, had a lot of fun with the filmmaking process. There are so many stylistic flourishes in this movie, so many interesting camera tricks, and so much good like effects work. It's very imaginatively filmed. And Ernest Dickerson was actually the cinematographer, Spike Lee's cinematographer, before he became a filmmaker. And I think that you could see this movie in particular, you could really see his roots as a cinematographer with the emphasis on visuals and all the stylistic flourishes that he throws in it. You could really see that peeking through. And like I said, Snoop Dogg is just hilarious in the role. He's a blast. He's a fun villain. Not all of this can be taken too seriously. Obviously, that line like "Gangsta of Love, don't eat no fried chicken." It's very self-aware. It seems to be aware of what it's doing, and I think that's part of the fun of Bones. But it's serious enough that you still take the story seriously without sacrificing the campiness and the humor that comes along with it.
Yeah, well, Snoop Dogg is hilarious in it, and a lot of the scenes are hilarious. It's got a campy quality to it that's a lot of fun, but every line that Snoop Dogg says is delivered super serious, and it makes it that much better for me.
Yeah,
his long hair all straight down, and it is. I think that was the epitome of his very unique look.
The way that he flips that switchblade at the beginning of the flashbacks when you see him as like a pimp in the back in there. I don't know, was he driving a Cadillac or something?
Yeah.
A lot of like, you could tell this is a loving tribute to not just horror, but like blaxploitation movies, even the look of it. Ernest Dickerson, you could tell, really got the look down in the flashbacks of what 70s blaxploitation movies look like. And of course, having Pam Grier getting herself to look. And Pam Grier is almost ageless because when she's in the flashbacks to the 70s, she looks almost as good as she does in her actual 70s movies. Pam Grier.
And it's cool too that Snoop Dogg is kind of an anti-hero. He's a horror villain, but you're rooting for him at the same time because he's taking revenge on very bad people.
He's likable. His storyline is sympathetic. That's actually my favorite sequence in the movie is when they explain his origins and what makes him Bones.
Yeah, I thought it was great villains. I loved how they aged the villains and made that one, the crooked white cop, they put him in fat makeup.
Yeah.
For the current time.
Yeah.
But the house was awesome. It's this big, huge, like 3 or 4 story building in the middle of a really bad neighborhood, and it's eye catching. It just pops off the screen. The interior and exterior are really well designed. All the props and everything were awesome. I even love the CGI. The CGI was done in almost a lot of the CGI was done in almost a cut and paste way where it kind of fit. All the elements in this movie fit really well for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was
so stylized that the when the CGI doesn't look perfect, it's so stylized that it almost seems like it's intentional.
Yeah. And it's so effective the way that Ernest Dickerson builds up, because you keep seeing Snoop Dogg in these flashbacks and his backstory and everything, but you don't see Snoop Dogg, the horror villain. You kind of see his face, his CGI face, in the ghost that flies around. So you see a ghost flying around killing people with some very cool kills. And then you see him, each person he kills, he slowly materializes. So it's like a campier version of the Hellraiser thing where you see a skeleton slowly build muscles and veins. So every time he's killed.
That's a total Hellraiser tribute right there, or homage right there. There's no way that cannot be.
So then you get this really triumphant moment where you finally get to see Snoop Dogg in all of his horror villain glory, and I nerded out on it. I loved it.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, it took a while for you think of Candyman, you might see more black horror villains. And it took a while before we got another one. I don't think people appreciated it at the time. And look, it's because it's Snoop Dogg as a horror villain. I was even somewhat dismissive of it. But give this one a chance. I think it deserves better than the reviews make it out to be, because it doesn't have very positive reviews. I think it's better than what people gave it credit for. And I think that more people would have an appreciation for it now than back then. And really, trust me, Snoop Dogg does work in this role. He works.
Oh, yeah. And there's this trope that's in it that that's actually part of what I just mentioned when he makes his grand entrance as the horror villain. It's like this presence. I think it's harder to do than a lot of people realize, because I've seen it fall flat many times. And I know you like the Evil Dead remake, but it happened in the Evil Dead remake. You know, when Mia becomes the demon, she's this big formidable, the evil is risen, everyone watch out.
Mhm.
it just fell flat for me. She didn't feel like a threat. She didn't feel scary. But then when Snoop Dogg appears in this, Ernest Dickerson's such a great director. You feel that it's a grand entrance. Holy shit! Everybody run and hide.
Yep. Yeah. So this one was it's fun. It's an entertaining horror movie, and it's probably better than you realize if you ever dismissed it before. Give it a chance. If you like Demon Knight or you're familiar with Ernest Dickerson's brand of horror, I think you're going to have an appreciation for this movie. And I think it'd be hard, at the very least, to not appreciate how well shot it is and how creatively made it is. At the
Yeah.
very least, one must acknowledge that Ernest Dickerson threw a lot of creative resources around on this movie.
And sure, it's campy, but do not let that hinder you from seeing this movie. So, Sleepaway Camp's also campy. You know, a lot of Friday the 13th movies are campy. This stands pretty well next to all those, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
I mean,
So,
there's tons of movies out there that takes tropes and gives it their own spin, and this one is a really good one.
yep. So now we're going up to another horror villain. This time a female horror villain, and an awful movie. This movie sucks.
Yeah.
I just want to be very clear to the audience, but goddamn it, the character herself isn't great. It is, you gonna say it?
Queen of the Damned from 2002.
Akasha, played by the late, great Aaliyah. And I'm not a big fan of this movie in general. It's not as good as Interview with the Vampire. I don't think it's as good an adaptation of the Vampire Chronicles as that was. I don't think Stuart Townsend is, and this sounds weird, but Tom Cruise, Stuart Townsend probably fits the role of Lestat better in terms of his look and what you would think the character is. He does not sell it like Tom Cruise, and I even feel weird just saying that because Tom Cruise is so mismatched for that role in the first place. But so much of this movie just doesn't work for me, but Aaliyah's presence as the Queen of the Damned is incredible. She is a great horror villain. I think we'll never know how good of an actress she actually could have been, but if this is any indication, she certainly had a great screen presence. She had an instant, I don't know how to put it, she's fearsome. Whenever she's on screen, you get the sense that you're in the presence of something important. And really, when I see this movie again, I kind of want to fast forward through anything that doesn't feature Aaliyah as Akasha, the Queen of the Damned. And the quote I pick is, "You thought it was all you, the ego of a king as well. Yes, I know you, Lestat. I know you crave to have the world at your feet, so I've come to give it to you." And just the way that she's dressed, Aaliyah is so beautiful and so sexy, and the gold and the way that she looked like a very ancient, powerful force to be reckoned with. Great villain. Too bad the movie wasn't that good, but that does not diminish Aaliyah's final performance.
Yeah, and I was so excited for this movie to come out because I love Interview with the Vampire. So I couldn't wait to see this follow-up, an expansion of the story. And then I seen the images of Aaliyah. I was like, holy shit, wow.
Yeah.
And then you get to the movie and it's like this really bad rock and roll horror movie. That's a lot of it's filmed like a music video, and it just very little works about it at all. It's hard to sit through. But then Aaliyah comes on the screen and holy shit. And she has that presence that I talked about Snoop Dogg having in the last one. She's formidable. When she walks in the room, you feel like somebody's gonna die if you fuck with her.
And she's scarier too. You don't get like there's no traces of camp or like there's kind of funny. She's actually like legitimately fearsome and scary in that role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a great performance where it's a mixture of beauty and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And that's pretty hard to pull off. It's harder than you think.
Oh yeah.
She pulled it off great. And to shine so well in such a shitty movie, that's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Aaliyah. You gave us a great horror villain. I'm sorry the movie wasn't better, but you gave us a great horror villain regardless.
Yeah. The next one we're going to talk about is a seasoned actor who blessed us with his presence in a horror film. And that's the character is David Tapp from Saw 2004, James Wan's Saw, played by the great Danny Glover. And I also loved him in Predator 2. Mm-hmm. I actually personally like Predator 2 more than I do 1. It's got more horror elements to it. It's more one man against this beast. It's kind of a hopeless situation, and you see him kind of believably fight this gigantic hunting monster through the whole thing, and then it has that great ending where all the predators come up. But I was really excited to see him in Saw, and this is one of those instances where James Wan and Lee Wanell came up in film school, and they wanted to make their first film, and they're like, what can we get to get asses in the seats? What actors can we get to get people to pay attention, and that it's not just another indie film? And they picked Danny Glover and Cary Elwes, two accomplished actors, and I think Danny Glover really shined in this one and showed that he could be a formidable presence in horror.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I haven't seen this one in a while, but it's the only Saw movie that I actually really liked. And I think one of the reasons is the performance of Danny Glover. It's just in general, the acting in this one, I think, is a lot better than in the rest of the series. And especially to have somebody like Danny Glover, who has such a rich screen history and he's such an accomplished actor, he gave the movie an air of respectability, the way that Keith David or Tony Todd, the things that those actors bring to their roles. I feel like that's what he brought to Saw, a sense of sophistication to make this feel less like a cheap horror movie and feel more like a legitimate film, which it's not. Even if it didn't have him, it's not a cheap horror movie. But I think having his presence there only helps to solidify that.
And it became like a cheaper franchise, even though the budgets grew. It was still a cheap franchise with a lot of campiness, some bad acting, a lot of gratuitous torture porn scenes. And the original Saw had none of that. It had much more sophistication, much more real drama, real acting, real tension, real suspense. And Danny Glover brought it. Of course, he's a seasoned actor. We know and love him for years. And he's going to be in. He's reprising his role in Lethal Weapon.
We'll see how that goes.
He's coming out Lethal Weapon 5, so now he can really say, I'm too old for this shit, because he's really fucking old. Still looks good, though. He looks good for an older man.
Yep.
That brings us to one that I had to insist that we included on the list this week. James had not seen it till I showed it to him this week. It's the role of Mary in Isolation from 2005, played by the great Ruth Negga. She was in World War Z, and I really loved her in the show Preacher. She's one of the stars of Preacher. She's an excellent presence. In Preacher, she's larger than life. She's a badass chick. But in this one, Isolation, she was just the opposite. She was kind of a unassuming girlfriend of a guy that was staying on this farmer's property. And it's basically the premise is this farmer, he's kind of he's paid to let this company do experiments on his cows. So then these parasites start growing in the cows, and they start multiplying and becoming huge. So it turns into a monster movie. But it's a very measured kind of film with a lot of subtleties, a lot of layers. It could have very well turned into a typical monster movie. But I think performances like Ruth Negga's performance in this, it's so real. She felt like a real person. And then when she was called upon to be the final girl, she didn't suddenly become a badass. She was just a person surviving a horrible situation.
I think,
Go ahead.
Her performance to me works because when the movie starts, she doesn't really seem like she's even an important character in the movie. In the beginning, it's like the scientists and the people working on the cows and the workers and stuff like that. Her character is kind of like sidelined for a big chunk of the movie, and she's like a lot of these characters, she becomes an avatar because most of the audience is not going to be up with the jargon or is going to be into, the careers that these people have. And I think it's good to have her as the one who survives to the end and who lives to the end. She reveals herself to be the main character, and it's somebody that the audience could actually relate to very well. I think also inspiring because she seems like a regular person who just has to find strength and fortitude in the most out there, bizarre, and this movie is disgusting. It actually had me wincing. I don't wince a lot during movies, but Michael knows I've had a very visceral reaction to a lot of. I don't want to give it away, but there's some nasty shit in this movie, and
Yeah.
she's just a really great presence in it, and I think she kind of she elevates what she's doing, and there's an instant likability to her as well.
And her look, I just can't take my eyes off her face.
Mm-hmm.
Her face just leaps off the screen, and you just want to look at her, and you want to see what she does. And then the way she carries herself, she had an accent in this. She has a southern accent in The Preacher, so it was funny to see her with a foreign accent. What accent was that anyway?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't even know what accent that was. Irish or something?
Something like that. I think it was Irish, if I had to guess. It's an Irish film, but I don't think she's. I have to check again.
But it's fascinating to me just the contrast of this and then what became her biggest role was in The Preacher. Just the contrast of the look between the two characters, the attitude of the performances, and in Preacher she's called on to do a lot of really intense action scenes, and she pulls it off. Put this woman in more movies.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So now to next one.
Yes, another understated one. Moses from Attack the Block in 2011, played by John Boyega. It's a movie about aliens who attack the inner city, like a really poor neighborhood, and it's up to this group of inner city kids, the black kids, to stop these aliens.
I've actually never seen this movie before. Just to clarify, this is one of the ones I have not familiar with the film. I've seen pieces of it in the Horror Noir documentary, and I'd heard of it, but it's not one I made my way around to yet.
And this one leans more toward action than it does horror, and the aliens have kind of campy look to them. They look like big apes with big giant glowing teeth. So it's got a bit of a campy element to it, but a lot of great performances all the way across the board by a lot of cool indie actors, especially John Boyega. He's got a great look to him. You see why he starts getting bigger parts later. And he looks like a leading man. He has the charisma of a leading man. And he kind of just... It's an ensemble cast of a lot of really good indie actors, and he really spearheads it and really heads the cast in a very competent and confident way.
So having not seen it, I don't have much to say, but I did find one quote. Now, I reckon the Feds sent them this way. Government probably bred those things to kill black boys. First they sent in drugs, and they sent guns, and now they're sending monsters in to kill us. They don't care, man. We ain't killing each other fast enough, so they decided to speed up the process. I'll have to make my way around to checking this out at some point.
Yeah, another one with a political message that's very competently delivered by great acting.
Yep.
It's a really good movie. I highly recommend Attack the Block from 2011. That brings us to another modern horror film from 2016. This one is a twist on the zombie subgenre. It's Melanie from The Girl with All the Gifts, played by Senia Nanua.
Oh man, she's great in this role, and much like Night of the Living Dead, this was not written for a black actress, but she was the best one to come in, so she got the role. And I think that kind of makes it even more empowering that she is somewhat the savior of humanity, and she holds the key to a lot of different things. She's believable, and like I said, you got to get good child actors. It's really challenging to find actors who can portray emotions that theoretically they would not have experienced up to that point in their life, and she does a great job of doing this. She's believable in the role. I like the twist that she herself is actually part zombie and is bred that way, so she can be a normal person who gets activated and triggered by blood. Just a very endearing character, and some really cool quotes. If I had a box of bad things, I put you in it and close the lid. And then why should it be us who dies for you? When she's kind of talking to a scientist who's basically using people as scapegoats as an experiment, her standing up. So she becomes kind of a savior for humanity in this film. Great performance. It's a great movie. Loved it. Girl with All the Gifts is probably one of my favorite horror films from the 2010s in the past decade.
Yeah, and she's another one. A little girl acting with very accomplished actors, Glenn Close.
Oh yeah.
And look at the way she mixed it up with Glenn Close, just so effortless.
Yeah.
And she had an air of wisdom that was beyond her years in that one too.
Mm-hmm.
You could see like this seriousness in her face, like there was a lot going on in her head, even beyond what she was saying. She had a lot of good dialogue too. So that brings us to, of course, the famous performance of the character Chris Washington in Get Out in 2017 by Daniel Kaluuya.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done so much already since Get Out, and you can see why. What a standout performance. He should have gotten an Oscar for that.
He was nominated for it. This one, obviously, Get Out is probably the most significant black horror film in a long time. I don't want to say of all time because it's hard to say what that is, but of recent times, because it's the one that blew open the doors for black filmmakers. It's proved, even though it's been proven before in the past with movies like Dracula, that audiences want to see black horror films. They want to see more of these. And this is the one that actually finally got through to Hollywood, where now Hollywood is actively looking for more black filmmakers and more black horror films. And they're actually right now converting a lot of stuff that was made for white actors into films that could fit a black cast. Chris Washington's character, played by the great Daniel Kaluuya, is just an amazing performance. I'm thinking of the scene when he's being hypnotized by his to-be stepmom, where he's going through that flashback and he's remembering the day that his mother died, how in a car accident, his reaction, what she was doing, the tears going down his face as he's paralyzed and he has to relive this really horrifying moment. I saw a lot of people who said that they didn't think his performance was Oscar-worthy. Basically that the movie was Oscar-worthy, but not his performance. Bullshit. Go back, look at that scene, look at his acting, look at the subtlety in it, and look at how all of these emotions are registering. You could read everything that's going on his face in a scene where he's just pinned to the couch and he doesn't have much to say, he can't move. Just his facial expressions and the look in his eyes and the tears that stream down his face are enough to completely sell that moment. So yes, it was an Oscar-worthy performance, despite what some people like to say to the contrary. I think it's a very empowering horror film. I had the pleasure of seeing it on opening night in Long Beach, California, with a primarily black audience. The audience was very appreciative towards it, laughed at all the right points, jumped at all the right points, gasped at all the right points. Probably one of the funnest experiences I've had in a movie theater was going to see Get Out on opening night. Came a big hit. Nobody expected it to be that. Now we have Jordan Peele, who is one of the major creative forces working in horror right now.
There's few movies that pull you into the main character's struggle as good as this one does.
Yeah.
And it's because of his performance. He has such an earnest honesty to his face, and there's so much happening in his head that he doesn't even say. He's like a man of few words, but there's a lot going on in his head, and you can tell what's going on in his head just by looking at his facial expressions.
Yeah.
And then when he's called upon to deliver the narrative in a realistic way, he does it. Mm-hmm. When he's called upon to do big, highly emotional scenes or very graphic scenes, he pulls that off just as well as the dramatic scenes.
Yeah. So yeah,
and I see why he's been flooding the movies flooding films since then.
He's in the current film Judas and the Black Messiah, which is with Lakeith Stanfield. Hearing amazing things. I got to check it out, and I know that he's a great actor. Just based on this and Widows and other performances, I can't wait to see what else he has on the line in the future. Yeah. Get Out. You're the man.
Cool. Now, let's quickly mention this one because I already discussed it at length on the podcast a while back. It's the character Private First Class Edward Boyce from the movie Overlord, played by Jovan Adepo. Mm-hmm. It's an extremely competent performance, very effective. He carries the movie really well. And this is a movie that shouldn't even have black actors in it because there wouldn't have been that many black people in a platoon in World War II. Mm-hmm. But He still carries the movie great. He's a great hero. You feel his struggle, and you feel like he's relatable enough to where you're pulled into the action with him, and you wonder what you would do in that situation. So it's very effective, understated performance. I don't think enough people talk about it. Jovan Adepo in Overlord from 2018.
Okay, I don't have much to say about this. There's one thing I just want a quick correction on. It turns out that there were more black soldiers in World War II than we had realized in the platoon. We're barely kind of finding out a lot of this information now. A lot of it's been erased from history. So it actually turns out it's not completely inaccurate at all.
Oh, it might have been more accurate than I thought then. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. So we are down, and sorry we're cutting this short, but time's running out. We're coming down to the last character of the day, another Jordan Peele creation.
Yep. Adelaide Wilson, and also Red from Us in 2019, played by Lupita Nyong'o.
Oscar-winning actress. Okay, so I know that you're not as big of a fan of Us as I am. To be clear, I don't think it's as good as Get Out, but I do think it's a very ambitious, ballsy horror film. And I think a lot of what makes it work is Lupita Nyong'o. Lupita Nyong'o is class personified. She's an Oscar-winning actress. She's stunningly gorgeous. She's beautiful. She was also in Little Monsters, which is another horror film from the same year, showing that she's not afraid to really tackle the genre or really jump into it. And she's great in this because she plays the double role of Adelaide Wilson, who is a normal person, and her counterpart, Red, kind of her doppelganger that lives underground. And what's interesting is that she has two different performances. One is Adelaide, which is a regular person, and one is Red. Red speaks in a very she speaks like this. Her big quote is, "We're Americans." When they ask her, "Who are you?" "We're Americans." I forgot what the condition's called, but there's actually a real condition that clamps your throat up where you would speak raspy like that. If you were to be underground and you were not exposed to a lot of, if you don't talk a lot, you didn't speak a lot throughout the years, your voice would be closed up like that, which is why she speaks in that. So it's actually a very accurate portrayal of something very specific that happens to people who don't really exercise their vocal cords. I think she's intimidating as Red. She is very, here's the thing. I don't know if I would say she's sympathetic as Adelaide Wilson. She seems like she might be sympathetic, and I don't want to ruin the movie, but from the very beginning, there's something very suspicious about her character and the way that she behaves and her nervousness. Like, she knows, and when you see the movie, if you see the movie, you'll understand why she is like that. But I think that she clues you in from the beginning that she's not exactly all that she claims to be, and that there's something lingering inside of her that's kind of mysterious, but you don't know exactly what it is, and then you kind of realize why she is that way by the end of the film.
Well, I think I told you before, I absolutely loved it up to one point, like when the whole family dynamic in the beginning, and then when you see the people that are their doppelgangers, like standing outside, is all very tense, very, very realistic family, a compelling family, a family that you want to watch and you want to pay attention to what happens to them. And the movie lost connection with me somewhere along the way, and I can't really make any complaints about it that would say that it's a bad movie at all. It just lost connection with me for one reason or another. A lot of it probably had to do with my expectations after Get Out. I expected more of Get Out times 20, but.
Well, I think what Jordan Peele wanted to do with Us is that Jordan Peele actually took offense to people who would say that Get Out is not a horror film, because he said, I made that to be a horror film. It is very clearly most definitely supposed to be a horror film. So he wanted to make Us, when he made it, he wanted to make very sure that nobody could make the claim it's not really a horror movie. It's actually a thriller. It's actually this, or a stupid Golden Globes fiasco nominating it as a fucking comedy or something.
Yeah.
The movie obviously does have humorous moments, but I think Jordan Peele was trying to show off the batshit crazy imagery that he is capable of in the horror genre. And it's a much bigger movie. I don't think it's as good as Get Out because I don't think it's as focused in its storytelling and its message. I think it's a lot more messy as a film. And I also think that comes from the sprawling ambition of what the movie is, because it has such a big scale story and the message is so large that I think anytime you tackle bigger subject matter, or you go bigger with your film, you open yourself up to, I guess, a little bit more chances of failure. And so I said, not everything in the movie works completely for me, but enough of it works for me that I have huge admiration for it as a very ballsy film. And I also ballsy in the sense that this movie was a big hit. He knew it was going to be mainstream because he became such a big voice in the horror genre because of Get Out. To expose a mainstream audience to the more extreme horror imagery, the more of the surrealism, more of the out there, a lot of this features the type of imagery you would not expect in a movie so mainstream or in a movie that made as much as Us did. So I have to give him credit for bringing the certain type of batshit insanity that horror audiences love to a wider audience in general.
And I did feel like I still felt like I was being introduced to an actress who I was going to see a lot more of from now on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Lupita Nyong'o, I actually think that she was good enough to be nominated for Best Actress. However, this did not get the same Oscar love that Get Out did. Not that it deserves the same amount of love. It's not as good of a film. But I do think that performance was good enough to be nominated for Best Actress. And I think it was one of the most critically acclaimed performances of the year. Even critics seem to agree that her performance was one of the standouts of the year. But I guess they already gave it to Get Out, and the Academy had to revert to their bias against the horror genre.
Yeah.
So she didn't get her Oscar nomination. I mean, I know she already has an Oscar and all that, so good for her. But it would have been nice just to have that extra, I guess, level of acknowledgement.
But there'll be more with her. There'll be more nominations for sure.
Yeah.
We had a couple honorable mentions to round off the list, but I just had to mention one more. I just came up with at the last minute. I just thought we should mention, and because it's one of my personal favorite performances from a black actor in a long time. It's Malik from Spiral, played by Jeffrey Bowyer-Chapman.
Oh,
if you want to hear a couple episodes back, we discussed it at length. So if you want to hear about it, listen to that one. But I think he's worthy of being discussed in this. The best black characters in horror.
Yeah. Well, go back and check out that episode for the audience because we actually go into depth onto that performance and that character in our episode where we discuss Spiral. So
our honorable mentions are don't shoot us for putting these in our honorable mentions, but it's Maximilian Preacher Polly and Guido, played by Eddie Murphy in Vampire in Brooklyn, 1995, a Wes Craven movie. Silly, campy, but still a good performance by Eddie Murphy. And it was just not enough of a horror performance for us to include it with all these other great ones. And the other one was Eric Brooks / Blade from Blade 1998, Wesley Snipes. Blade 2 in 2002, Blade Trinity 2004. And this is another one. A great performance, very important performance for black actors in the horror genre, but it's just more of a superhero action movie than it is a horror movie. But still worth mentioning, Wesley Snipes as Blade.
And one last thing that I'm going to mention is one character that we did not mention is because we didn't want to do things that were emblematic of specific tropes, despite it being a great character and a great performance, is Scatman Crothers in The Shining, who is excellent, magnificent in the role of Dick Halloran and brings so much to it. But it does have, with a lot of audiences, that uncomfortable layer that his character is sacrificed so the white audience, so the white characters could live, which does not actually happen in the novel. Certainly worthy of discussion, but I'm trying to stay away from those tropes and give, more empowered performances than that. Still a great performance, still a great character, still a great movie, but that's the reason it's not in the main discussion.
So we've roughly mentioned 30 horror films today, and I would highly recommend every single one of them except for Queen of the Damned.
Yeah, except for Queen of the Damned. But even
Queen of the Damned, just watch it. If you're curious about Aaliyah's performance, just watch it purely because of that. But besides that, it's a bad movie. But everything else on the list, I highly recommend.
Yep. Well, check us out on facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. Check us out on Instagram @Pickles Horror Show. Check us out on our Flow page, which we're going to put a link to in the podcast description, which will give you access to all of our social media pages and all the platforms we're on, including YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. We're going to be coming to Anchor next, working on transferring it into a few other services to expand. It's been a great joy doing today's episode. I had really fun doing it. A lot of characters lots of characters. I had fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun today. And before we go, I just have to mention something in the news that happened this week, just really quick. I don't know if anybody's heard of Once Upon a Nightmare. It's a web series that was coming up. It was supposed to have Kane Hodder and Doug Bradley as Pinhead. It was supposed to have all these great iconic horror actors and actresses and directors involved. But this guy, Michael Dark One, he calls himself, turns out he did not have Kane Hodder secured. He did not have Doug Bradley. He did not have these actors secured, and he was still taking money from people on Indiegogo. And they got up to like $16,000 before he was caught. So a lot of my friends were involved in this. I'd like to extend my condolences to all my friends who were really excited about this project. And let's look forward to bigger and better things in the future.
You contributed to the Indiegogo campaign. Go get your refund. They're giving refunds on that right now.
Yeah, and the refunds were locked at first, but people really started coming down on the guy, so he did start releasing refunds. And the last I checked, the budget was way down to like a few thousand.
Yep.
That's something that makes people like us look really bad.
Yeah. Don't engage in that kind of behavior. Be good. Be decent people and don't lie.
Yeah.
Till next week, folks. Happy horror.
Happy horror.